Hi, I'm Trevor and I'm four fathers. It's a problem when our kids are choosing not to listen to us. And it's a bigger problem if that's happening consistently and frequently. I know that it's annoying, it's frustrating, it causes fights. You don't need me to tell you that. But as a former high school teacher, I can tell you that the consequences of letting this behavior go on will extend far beyond the momentary fights that you have. They're going to impact your lines of communication, which are key to maintaining the trust and respect that we want to nurture and maintain as dads, as parents. It's going to impact your relationship with your kid, and it's going to impact them at school in a pretty significant way. And so addressing this behavior sooner than later is important if we want to stop these consequences from coming down the pipe. The first consequence of our child not listening is that communication breaks down. That's pretty obvious. They're going to miss out on certain instructions that you give them. They might miss important details about what's going on later on. They might not be prepared. And on a slightly higher level, they might miss safety information, like learning or being reminded to turn off the stove after they're done using it. Or maybe they forget that they're not supposed to be jamming a knife inside the toaster to get their toast out. Those are problems, and those are real consequences of allowing a child to continue to choose to not listen to us. But even bigger are when our actual lines of communication are shut down. For our kids to trust and respect us, they've got to know that we're there for them. If they're not willing to communicate with us, we're not able to figure out what's going on with them. We can't empathize with them. We can't support them. We can't be the dads or the parents that we need to be for them. And then as a result of that, the relationship itself is going to deteriorate. Our relationship with our kid will really erode because of the frustration and anger and resentment that starts to leak in if we allow them to continue to choose to not listen to us. It diminishes us as dads, as parents, because when we're frustrated or resentful, it's really hard to be compassionate, to be open, to be patient, to be kind, to be all those supportive things that our kids need us to be in order to fully trust and respect us. And so in that regard, our relationship is impacted. But even worse, we're probably going to be a lot more reactive, less able to be curious, there'll be less listening and more assumptions being made about what our kid's intention is. It's going to be really hard to be empathetic, obviously, at that point. And we're also probably going to jump to punishment a lot quicker, which is really just going to kind of beat down our relationship and keep this cycle going. But for this reason, it's very important that we address the behavior as soon as possible. As a perfectionist dad, I really struggled with not being able to help my daughter and not being able to be perfect. Just a little while ago, I wasn't able to help my daughter calm down. I became frustrated. And while I was speaking to her, she said, "Dad, it's like you don't love me. I just feel like you don't love me." And the perfectionist side of me was like, what the heck? I had actually got quite upset at that. I was getting more frustrated. But I remembered, hey, being frustrated is not going to make anything better. I gave myself a quick timeout. In that timeout, I reflected on it. And I realized really quickly that, you know what? When I'm sitting here being frustrated and angry and projecting all this towards her, it's actually impossible for me to be acting out of love. Of course, I always love my daughter, but love is patient, love is kind. When you're frustrated, that's not that. And she so bravely told me how she felt there. And because I took that second and I tried to listen, I realized, yeah, geez, there's actually never an okay time for me to be acting out of frustration with her, because every time I do it, I'm just pushing her further away. Now, it's a problem that a child is choosing not to listen because it affects your ability to openly communicate with them, which in turn really affects your ability to have a trusting and respectful relationship with them. But it also impacts them at school. And it really will be determined by how your kid is acting when somebody asks them to do something. Do they just ignore it? And if so, at school, there's going to be some consequences. Odds are teachers are going to start to look at them as somebody who is a problematic individual in the classroom. And then their patience starts to run out with them, and they start making assumptions, and they start jumping to punishment, and they start getting your kid out of the room, which is definitely going to have an impact on their learning. Because whenever the answer is just to remove them, learning can't continue. Even worse, if your kid it becomes defiant, instead of not listening, they do the opposite, or they tell you to screw off. That is very difficult for a lot of teachers to handle. And instead of hearing that your child is struggling in that moment, a lot of teachers, because they're afraid that, hey, if I don't treat this hardly, other kids are going to do it. Or this is an inappropriate behavior that I have to negatively consequence so it stops showing up. If they take any of those approaches, your kid's just going to be removed from the room again, which is going to result in less learning. And even worse, a lot of teachers don't do well with conflict, and they do terrible with students who will actively challenge their authority. They'll label them as ODD, they'll say they're oppositional defiant. From there, who knows what happens? Maybe they're spending more time in resource rooms, maybe they're spending more times working with EAs instead of being in the class with their peers, with their teachers and learning. And that's a really slippery slope, because the longer they're out, the harder it is to get back in. And so for your child's sake, dealing with this issue at home as soon as possible will help prevent these negative outcomes from coming in the school system as well. These are some of the reasons why it is very problematic if you have a kid who's choosing not to listen to you, and why that behavior needs to be addressed as soon as possible. There's lots of different reasons, though, why a kid will choose not to listen. And if it's just happening once in a while, that could just be miscommunication. There's also very healthy reasons why a kid will start to not to listen at times. And there's incidental reasons, reasons that are out of your control for why a kid's going to choose not to listen. Recognizing those two allows you to deal with them differently. But there's also a third category, which is behaviors that we're causing as parents, not intentionally, but it is a consequence of some of our behaviors. And so knowing that this is the cause will allow you to better identify how you can support your kids so that they can feel that trust, feel that respect, and start listening again. Subscribe and follow if you'd like to know more about why our kids sometimes choose to stop listening to us, and more specifically, how we can be contributing to that behavior as parents. Thanks, and have a great day.